Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast, the Evil Dungeon Master Universe podcast. I am your host, Evil Dungeon Master Vince. Hopefully you're having a good Thursday, and I want to thank all the people that have gone to Spotify and rated the podcast there. Appreciate those people. Want you to get over to Apple now as well and do the same thing. All these reviews do help when a new person looks at the podcast and they see reviews, that they know that people are actually listening to the podcast and giving me feedback. Hopefully, everything's well. EvilDM.com is my website where you can find everything, contacting me, voicemails, all the works, and everything else. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about a game that I played at Gencon 2011. And everybody knows that who's listened to this podcast or listened to my YouTube videos, I'm a big fan of Unisystem by Eden Studios, especially the cinematic Unisystem by Eden Studios. So today we're going to focus on Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game by Eden Studios. It's a game that I don't really get to play a lot because not many people want to play the game because, they either didn't like the show. You have two people that are in the category of they really like the show or they did not like the show. And the people that really like the show either don't care about the role-playing game or are interested in playing the role-playing game. And then it gets even to a smaller niche that people don't want to play or do play, or they can't understand the system because it's complicated. It's not really complicated. It's rolling a d10, looking at a chart, and comparing numbers that are already together. It's very simple. So I joined this game at Gen Con. The last time I went was 2011. I haven't been back since. It's too far of a trip, too expensive of a trip to constantly go to these things even every other year. But unless you live in the area, then I understand. Like DM Matt from Roll for Initiative podcast, he lived in the area, so he was able to go, and he paid for a pass. All he had to do was just drive there and park. Anyway, so we all had created our own characters for this one game. It was 4 original characters. There was Jess, who was a junior varsity volleyball player turned into vampire hunter. So it was kind of the same thing as Buffy. I think Buffy was kind of a volleyball. No, she was a cheerleader. Whatever. Then there was Luna, who was a witch. Original. But my character was a tech-savvy genius with a knack for creating, like, Slayer gadgets. He was, I named him Eli. He wasn't in high school, but he was kind of more like a high school dropout, I decided. And he spent his time after finding out that vampires do exist, that he needed to rid the world of them. So he was pretty much a genius, like a tech genius. And he was dedicating his life to making all these little gadgets and everything. He was kind of maybe like an Egon from the Ghostbusters, or maybe a Ray, just not as smart as those guys. But he was able to just make all these weird, different little gadgets to help kill vampires. And then there was Grace, like a half demon something. I don't remember exactly what Grace was, except for constantly being reminded that she was half demon. And seriously, she was always sad. Like, the character was sad. I wasn't sure if the player was sad or the character was sad, because the girl who was playing the half demon character just always seemed depressed. And I couldn't tell. I mean, she was acting really good, or maybe she was just sad that day. I don't know. I kind of just left her alone because, I've never met this person, not my business. So if she was gonna open up, then, obviously I'll listen and talk, but she didn't, I don't know. Didn't seem very, very receptive to everybody else, and I don't even know why she was there, to be honest. So our adventure began obviously in Sunnydale at a diner where we were having lunch, talking to one another because we all knew each other from school and everything like that. And we found out that there was a series of strange occurrences that had been taking place at the diner. We heard some people mumbling about it. Some patrons were disappearing, only to reappear a few days with no memory of where they've been. And as we listened and started to write down some notes and stuff like that, we found out that it always occurred during a certain time here at the diner. So we started asking some questions for people and asking about this and that. And we found out that people came between, late at night, like 9, 10 o'clock at night, when the diner was very slow. So we're like, So we decided to meet back at around 9 o'clock and see what was going on. We noticed that between the 9 and 10 o'clock hour that when various people came in to get something to eat or something to drink, like coffee or something, they would suddenly just get up and walk through to the kitchen area and through the back freezer area, the walk-in freezer. So we're like, huh? And I remember we followed one guy who just basically got a coffee, and I was like, the coffee's looked at the coffee, couldn't figure out what was different about the coffee because it looked the same. I wasn't about to drink it because if he drank it, got straight up, walked out into the kitchen. I was like, all right. So we followed him into the kitchen and we saw that he went into the walk-in freezer. So we waited for a few minutes to see if maybe there was someone in there or doing something. We didn't hear any screams. We didn't hear anything at that point. So we walked over to the walk-in freezer, and I also want to note that I remember there was no staff around either, too, at this point. So I thought that was kind of weird. So we went over to the freezer, and we looked inside the freezer. There was like this portal at the back of it, a glowing red portal. And we all looked at each other, and without second thought, the guy playing Jess, just charged into the portal. We're like, okay. So we all jumped into through the portal too. I figured, why not? It's a Gencon game. I mean, the most you could do is we all die and we walk away laughing. That's what happens when you play Gencon games. They're one shots and they're just do whatever you want, as long as you have fun. So when we came through the portal, we found ourselves in a bizarre alternate reality, and everything was very, very dark and rainy, kind of like Seattle. And we found out that vampires had ruled the world and humans were their slaves for feeding. What was also a bizarre thing is that we realized that we were vampires ourselves, except for Grace. Grace was actually full human now, and so her player was kind of annoyed. But we knew we were vampires. We didn't know how to use our vampiric abilities. And how do we know we were vampires? Because when we got near Grace, we smelt food. We were just like salivating and like, ooh, We didn't know what blood tasted like, but we knew that giving in to the temptation of vampires based on lore and things like that, it wasn't a good idea. Yeah, so we were in this new strange world and we had all these cravings, and the GM kept rolling to see if we gave into those cravings because of Grace always being with us. But we also found out after walking around and kind of snooping around and looking, we found it was difficult to just randomly feed on people. There were laws about feeding on human slaves that you can only feed at certain times in certain places. It was some law that we found that was put into place years ago to keep the population alive, as well as keep the food in balance with the population. Which it was, I was going to say, a very good way that he kind of kept things in order in the world. It kind of this whole thing reminded me of the movie Daybreakers. If you remember the movie Daybreakers when it came out in 2009, it was kind of like this. The world ruled by vampires and humans were fed on. So it kind of reminded me right away because the movie came out in 2009. This is 2011, so it was kind of fresh in the mind somewhat. And it was a pretty decent movie, so I saw that one. There was a couple moments in the game that really stood out to me that I remember. It allowed us to kind of explore the characters in a new and challenging way because we were now vampires, so we had to be vampires and prove that we were vampires. And this one time we had to get into this club, and we found out there was a person in the club that had the answer to the portals and how to control the portals and tell us what was going on. But we had to prove that we were vampires because we all looked human, except Grace, who actually was human and still pissed. We had to prove that we were vampires, so we didn't actually know how to show our vampiric side. So the guards were like, "Well, if you're vampires, then prove it." And we didn't know how to prove it. And I remember it was I forget the character's name now offhand. Crap. Luna, who said that, well, fine, we'll just drink some blood. That'll prove it. Humans don't like blood. They'll vomit or make a disgusting face. So the vampire guard was just like, all right, great idea. And then we didn't do it because it was just like we knew if we gave into the blood, that would probably turn us into like feral vampires running around trying to uncontrolled because we've never fed before. And when you never fed on blood in most vampiric games, you turned into like a feral vampire because you don't know how to control it just yet. So we weren't able to prove ourselves in there. So we had to figure out another way into this club. And it was kind of cool because we figured out that we have vampiric abilities, and one of them happened to be climbing buildings, which I didn't know vampires could do, but apparently with this GM, yeah. I'm just like, well, for vampires, we should have certain abilities, like, being able to run really fast or climb things and everything. And he's like, yeah, definitely. So we tried climbing. We climbed the side of the building, went up to the building, got in through the ceiling. What was it? The moon, the sunroof. You know what I'm talking about. The glass on top of the building. I couldn't think of what it is. Well, we got in that way, got into the club. We finally got our answers that there was a vampire in this world that realized that they were running out of food, even though there were laws in place for humans and had human breeding camps. That eventually the vampires would overcome the amount of humans and there'd be no food and there would be people would starve to death. So he opened a portal to a new world and was slowly trying to get people to come over to this world. Which I don't understand why you picked Sunnydale, and I don't understand why you picked the one diner in Sunnydale to be the portal area. But I guess he decided that's what he was going to do. So it was a lot of fun, the game. And I wouldn't mind playing a game again with a good GM because it's a lot of fun. It's a blast to play. It's an easy D10 system. Shouldn't really take much brain thought to play the game. And you don't even have to play Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You can play whatever you want. An investigative game, like I was playing the detective game with it. I wrapped that up because I wanted to find something else to play the system with. But yeah, the game captures a lot of humor, horror, and it shows how the show really works. So, and it's great to create your own characters in that world. Tell me what you think. Write in the comments below, and oh yeah, Spotify has comments now too, so you can actually go to Spotify under the actual episode and leave a comment, which I didn't know they had. They just kind of recently turned it on. But yeah, so go do that. Or if you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe, and don't forget we have our live stream this Friday for members only. 99 cents a month. You can join the channel on YouTube. With that said, I'm going to head out. Keep it original, keep it old school. Good night. God bless. No drama, no clickbait. All gaming on this channel. Good night.